It doesn't matter if you're not high up in a night sky or if you're trapped being invisible in the misery of a slum. From amidst the rubble and trash, a hand rises. As long as you want to shine, as long as you have light in your heart, if you believe, then you are a star. In front of a blacksmith's shop, a boy observes a sword. He smiles, saying he never gets tired of looking at it. Someone suddenly calls out to him, saying they knew he had gotten distracted again. The protagonist recognizes her as Jumina, who calls him Vlad, saying that lately he's been very distracted. He tells her to go easy on him because that's one of the few pleasures he has in life. However, Jumina warns that standing there like a lunatic is making a lot of people talk about him. He wants to know what they're saying about him, and she looks around. She approaches and asks if he still hears that voice when he looks at a sword. He seems to ignore it, and she says that apparently he did something terrible in his past life. What kind of person would be struck by lightning in the middle of nowhere, especially a black lightning? She warns that he should spend more time at home, since the new bishop doesn't like this kind of omen. Besides, he worked for the Inquisition, so if he hears about these things, Vlad could be burned at the stake. Vlad says she's exaggerating, and she responds that he never listens. She reminds him that several people saw him get struck by lightning, so it's best he doesn't give them more reasons to be interrogated by the church. Vlad says it doesn't make any sense, and all he's doing is looking for a sword. She says that sometimes he's very frustrating and asks why he doesn't just buy it on credit. Vlad says it's too expensive, and she says it doesn't make sense. It's just a piece of metal, so how expensive can it be? After a brief silence, he says it costs 5 gold coins. Jumina says he must be joking. With 5 gold coins, you can live for an entire year, which is much better than a piece of metal. Suddenly, someone shouts, asking who called it a piece of metal. It's the blacksmith, saying that sewer rats like the two of them don't even deserve to look at that masterpiece. But Jumina says that only sewer rats pass in front of his shop anyway. So who does he expect to buy that thing? Is the old man already getting senile? The blacksmith says she's a pest for saying something like that. But Jumina continues, saying she doesn't know why he makes swords, since no knights pass through that failed place. The old man yells at the two of them, telling them to go back to their shop and wash some dishes. The girl gets angry, asking how he dares to say that to a young lady. Vlad pulls her and tells her to stop provoking the blacksmith, who is cursing and saying he won't waste more words on them. Watching them leave, the old man thinks they're really rotten. He saved the two from misery, and now he's being repaid with insults. In those cold times, it was he who gave them a lot of food. He gets angry and decides to go back to his shop, but not before noticing something. Vlad's footprints in the fog indicate that once again he stood there for a long time. But the blacksmith says he should be thinking about how to survive and not about how to get a sword. Those who come from a place like this can't fill their heads with dreams, or they will end up bitter and disappointed. This is something the blacksmith knows very well. Observing the sword, he says he will only sell it to someone who has the ability to leave this place. He doesn't want his masterpiece to rot here forever. However, looking at the blade, he says that no way it reminds him of the boy. Even in the filth of this slum, he somehow still manages to shine. This city is the main trading hub of the northern region and is ruled by the powerful Bayezid family. This is the region of Shura. But beneath all this beauty and splendor, there is shadow. And it is precisely where the slum is located. A place where everything considered trash and disgusting is abandoned. In a busy bar on the second floor, a man drags a girl by her hair, asking if she really thought she could deceive him like that. Being dragged, she wants to know what he means by being deceived. He says he's been a mercenary for 20 years and won't be made a fool of. Someone comes down the stairs saying that there's never a moment of peace there. The bald man points at Vlad and says it's good he showed up and tells him to call the madame of that place. Vlad warns that spending time with the madame requires payment in gold, not silver. The bald man angrily says that this place is trash to be spending gold on and claims that with that money, he could even buy his mother. Vlad just stares at him, but the bald man says that the candles they are using are a scam. He hadn't even taken his shirt off properly, and the thing had already gone out. Vlad asks if he really thought he could have fun with a 5-minute candle. He says that if he's so poor that he can't buy more time, he should go home and squeeze his own wife's butt. The man's veins are bulging even on his bald head, and Vlad says he's too noisy, so he'll have to show him something. He points to the clock and says they will use it to see if the candle really lasts 5 minutes. If the candle doesn't last, he can take out all his frustration on the woman he's holding. The bald man angrily says he doesn't want to believe a bunch of scammers like him. Vlad says he will have to participate in this bet, and if the candle lasts more than 5 minutes, then he'll have to get beaten until he loses a few years of his life. The mercenary trembles, wondering how such a young kid can have such a terrifying look. But without hesitation, Vlad lights the match and says they will now find out who the scammer is. The bald man sweats as time passes and the girl watches. Everyone in the bar is eager to see what will happen in the end. Finally, the candle goes out. The bald man turns to the clock and sees that 5 minutes have passed, and he already takes a hit to the face. The poor guy stumbles backward, and Vlad announces that exactly 5 minutes have passed. He lifts his foot and kicks the bald man in the butt. He falls into a small room. Vlad enters and closes the door, warning him that he can start praying now. Desperate, the chubby man asks him to wait, but Vlad doesn't forgive and starts beating him. saying that he seems to be the liar here. He orders him to repeat that thing he said about the mother he doesn't even have. With that, the poor guy takes a beating. The next day, someone eating says that the cannibals are not lasting 5 minutes. It's Vlad asking if they heard what he said. A knight eats calmly, and Vlad calls him George and says that they're trying to mess with the main source of money they have. Suddenly, a girl in that room screams, asking who had the courage to mess with the sacred candles of that place. Vlad says they will have to find that out. The girl says it's really good because that's now his new job. Vlad is confused, wondering how he will discover that. Suddenly, the girl says she already knows, and Vlad asks who it was then. She reveals that it was herself who messed with the candles. She was Marcella, the Madame of the Smiling Rose, saying she was just trying to get more money out of that bunch of drunks. She is radiant while George and Vlad say nothing. Sometime later, he is going down the stairs, thinking he beat the guy for no reason at all. But what can he do? If the Madame did it, then it's done. Suddenly, someone calls for him and says they heard he got into a fight yesterday, but thanks him for solving it and asks why things go wrong when he leaves for a bit. He hugs Vlad and says they need some extra money. Maybe he received some tips from the candles he sold. Vlad asks what Barry thinks he's doing. The guy backs off, telling him to take it easy and that there's no need to make a scary face. He's not asking for the money, he's suggesting a deal. Vlad asks what kind of deal. Barry says that if Vlad hands over the money, he will give him something he wants. A pickpocket, somewhat silly, somewhat crooked, and totally incompetent. He lifts the boy by his hair and asks if Vlad recognizes him. He says he will sell him for 40 silver coins, which is almost a steal, it's so cheap. Vlad asks how the boy's fingers and ankles are. Barry says he's still intact and they would never sell something damaged. They only give him a little adjustment, but he's still healthy and strong. Vlad tells them to go to hell and throws the money on the ground. But he warns that next time they shouldn't call him and should kill the kid. Barry and his friends leave, saying they're too honest to kill a boy like that. But Vlad knows they're all a bunch of liars. As they leave, they comment that it was obvious Vlad would accept the offer. There must be some reason he's buying all these street kids. Vlad calls out the name Ned. The boy apologizes and says he tried to escape, but Vlad stares at him and asks if they broke anything. Ned says no. He then tells the boy to disappear before he has to beat him too. Ned gets up and thanks Vlad. Vlad wonders how he's going to gather 5 gold coins at this rate. The city of Asura is bustling, and someone writing says the boy was lucky. He could have lost both fingers for trying to steal like that. This man is Harvem, Captain Hoover's attendant. He had his fingers cut off and his ankles slashed, because the bishop wanted to make an example of him last time. Harvem comments to Vlad that he heard the candles from the Smiling Rose had been tampered with. Vlad says information is traveling very fast lately, and Harvem says everyone is saying it was the Madame's doing, but he knows she's not like that and would never do something like that. Vlad says that's the case and that George isn't someone who likes to cause trouble without reason either. But Harvem isn't naive and says that since they know the guy did this, he must have a very good reason. Vlad asks what he thinks the reason is, and the boy replies that the guy must be in urgent need of money. So it's good to be careful because there's only one reason families start gathering money so desperately: a war against another family. At the moment, there are 5 bosses who coordinate the slums of Shkora. George, who is known as the guard of the brothel girls, the Black Bear, the gambling guy known as Dice, Captain Hoover, and lastly, the guy known as the Stingy Hand, One-Armed Jack. The scariest things in life approach us silently from the shadows. And at this moment, Jack is in front of Vlad asking where the boss is. Vlad knows that accidents happen without any warning and destruction always comes unexpectedly. He wonders why the Stingy Hand is there in front of him. Are they preparing for war? The guy beside him yells at Vlad and orders him to answer the boss now. Vlad stares at him and says he doesn't know where the boss is because he's just the guy who sells candles. Not giving an answer to the boss makes the guy lose his temper. He punches the candles, ordering Vlad to call the boss now. But Vlad remains calm while all the candles fall to the ground. The place goes silent. Both the girls working there and the drunks and Jamino watch what's happening. Vlad crouches down, saying it's a pity that so many expensive candles got broken like that. Almost losing his temper, the guy asks if he thinks it's a joke. Vlad asks for permission. The guy asks what he means and he repeats, telling the guy to move his foot. At that moment, the guy loses his temper and comes to kick Vlad. Vlad thinks that a fight is nothing more than a small-scale war. You need to consider the terrain and come up with a strategy. With a broom, he hits the guy right on his supporting foot, making him lose his balance from the kick and hang in midair. While Vlad goes on the attack, saying it's necessary to be audacious. He hits the guy in the jaw with the certainty that this is the way to achieve victory. The girls in the brothel, the drunks, and even One-Armed Jack are impressed. The protagonist knows very well that in the slum, there is a rule that never changes. The right person is the one standing and the losers are on the ground. The other henchmen want to rush in, asking how he dares to do something like that. But Jack tells everyone to stop and says he likes the kid a lot. He apologizes for not being able to clap louder, but it's because he only has one hand. Vlad says it's okay, he doesn't discriminate against anyone with a disability. Jack laughs, saying the kid is wild, but he warns that he'll see him again later. and asks about the child who was with him before, whose name he even forgot. Vlad says if he doesn't remember the name, the child must have died a long time ago. Suddenly someone shouts, asking Jack what brings him there. It's George, saying that if he had known, he would have prepared something for him to eat. Jack smiles, asking since when they've been so close to have a casual meal. George says they can go up since it looks like he brought some visitors. But one-armed Jack replies that he's not hungry and asks if there's something good to drink. George says if he goes up, Marcella will take good care of him. And with that, Jack says if that's the case, he'll have to give it a try. With that, they leave. And Vlad sighs in relief, thinking that was a close call. The only problem is that a bunch of candles got broken. Sometime later, someone calls for him. It's Jack, saying that George spoke very highly of the kid and he knew he had a good eye for people, saying that if one day he gets tired of the smell of candles, he can come work for him. Vlad says he's fine because there he has something to drink, a place to sleep, and food to eat. One-armed Jack smiles, saying they can also provide all that, and he throws a coin, saying it's for the candles. Vlad sees that it's a gold coin and tells Jack that the value isn't that high. But one-armed Jack replies that there's a lot more where that came from if he wants to come work for him. With that, he thanks for the food and leaves with everyone. Vlad thinks the guy is smiling, so maybe the conversation went well. Until Jamina from the second floor calls him, saying that George wants to talk. Upstairs, no one seems happy, and Vlad is impressed. When George gives him a knife as a present, saying that circumstances are changing, and tells him to keep it close at all times, Vlad could tell from the vibe of the brothel. The conversation between Jack and George had been a disaster. Jack said he didn't want to see him selling candles anymore, and George asked what he was going to do then. George explained that some of his sources are warning that Jack is bringing in a mercenary knight. Vlad asked if it was someone like him. George said yes, someone like him. In Shkora, Jack has a huge gang, but no one there can defeat a former knight like George. As the saying goes, an army of sheep cannot defeat a single wolf. However, the balance of power would change completely if Jack hired a former knight as a mercenary. George says this would be a huge disadvantage, and that's why he needs Vlad, and warns that soon he will receive his first mission. Harvem had his fingers and heel tendons cut, so he can't walk properly. But naturally intelligent, he learned to read on his own and works as an administrator for Captain Hoover. Seeing Harvem made Vlad realize that sometimes if you work hard, you can be rewarded with a better life. He makes a cut with the sword, and someone calls out to him. A voice says he needs to keep his elbows closer to his body when cutting like that. Vlad wonders why he hears a voice every time he starts training. A month ago, he was struck by black lightning, and has been hearing the voice ever since. Every time he picks up something that resembles a sword, he hears this demonic voice. He starts thinking that maybe the right thing to do is to buy holy water and not a sword. Maybe the secret is to ignore it, since the more he responds to this voice, the more it keeps talking to him. He needs to stay focused and give his best until the end, concentrating all of his energy and strength, and strike with everything he has. However, as soon as he raises his hand, the voice tells him to bring his elbow closer, and instinctively he obeys. He makes the vertical cut and feels that something was different. Before, it was just the sensation of holding a sword, but this time he felt he created something abnormal. An energy that flows beyond the reach of the sword, known as the blade arc, which makes Vlad wonder whose voice is in his head. Under the moonlight, someone cleans a blood-soaked blade, saying that age is starting to catch up. The winter cold now seems to cut right to the bone. He hears a chicken sound, and thinks it's not a bad imitation. It seems like it's someone pretty dumb. He then approaches and tells whoever it is to stop what they're doing because he has arrived. The voice asks if he is Stanger. The man says yes and assumes he must be Vlad. Stanger says he knows Vlad is from the slum, so it's strange that he has golden hair and blue eyes. One might even confuse him for a noble. Vlad hands over the letter from the boss, and Stanger understands that another family has also hired a mercenary knight. Vlad turns, saying he will lead the way and they should arrive in 2 nights. Stanger says nothing and sighs, saying he doesn't know if he should follow someone so idiotic. Vlad says he's smart enough to show the way, but Stanger says he doesn't seem like it, especially since he imitated the sound of a summer bird, but they're in winter. And he warns that if he notices Vlad changing the path, he'll kill him on the spot. Vlad looks at him and tells him to follow quickly because he doesn't want to mess up his first mission either. Stanger is incredulous about this kid. He put on the scariest face he knows, but the boy didn't hesitate for a second. He smiles, thinking he now understands why George likes this guy. He really is a diamond in the rough. Sometime later, the two are in a cave, and Vlad is just staring at Stanger. Stanger asks why he's doing that. Hasn't he ever seen a retired knight before? Vlad says not this close, and the man says it looks like he hasn't seen much of the world. Vlad asks where he's from, and the man says he's from Dhaka. The boy recognizes it as a place in the middle of nowhere. Stanger says he wished Vlad would get lost a little so he'd have an excuse to kill him. But Vlad jokes, asking if knights can't take a joke. Stanger says his dried meat seems very fresh, is part of it for him. Vlad says unfortunately he didn't bring any for him and asks if he doesn't have any food. Pulling out 2 old dried meats, Stanger says he does have food. Vlad lights the barbecue and the poor guy is starving, saying the smell is very good. Stanger then asks Vlad if he wants to know something, and warns he will answer 1 question for each piece of dried meat. He He says Vlad is lucky because an opportunity like this isn't seen every day. Vlad just looks, asks how many pieces he wants, and says just tell him and he'll hand them over. But Stanger responds by saying he's proud of him and that a knight can only accept something in a fair trade. Vlad asks if he's retired and he replies yes. Before Vlad finishes, he already asks his name and the man replies Stanger. Vlad asks his age and the man says 42 but tells him not to push his luck. The boy asks if he knows how to use aura. Stanger smiles, saying that it seems Vlad doesn't know much about the world. Not all knights can use aura, and using aura in combat is something completely different. Vlad insists, asking if he can use it or not. Stanger smiles and Vlad gets scared, handing over all the dried meat to the man. They stare at each other and Stanger warns that he only makes trades for something of equal value. But you will be a little generous since he's been eating old dried meat all this time. Vlad felt anxious, thinking the guy would use aura right in front of him. Stanger prepared himself and opened just one eye. Vlad asked why he did that. In empty space, he explained that he needed to do this to summon his world, which is kept in the depths of his soul. He told Vlad to pay close attention, as this was the true essence of a knight. He opened his eye and Vlad was astounded. Stanger had activated the aura on his blade. Sometime later, they had already arrived in Shura. Stanger was complaining that he looked like a beggar and Vlad said it was better for him not to stand out. He said it was too disgusting and that a knight has his dignity. Vlad ignored him and said that when they arrived, Stanger should go through the back door while he went through the front. They then started walking. Stanger found it strange that the place was too quiet. Suddenly, both stopped. Stanger asked if that was normal in this place, to which Vlad replied no. In front of the Smiling Rose, it was full of bodies. Vlad said they would have to split up now and told Stanger to go through the back door. Stanger was about to ask where he was going, but Vlad had already run off, saying he would see him soon. The place was bloodied, and as soon as Vlad entered, he saw that the entire brothel was destroyed. Upstairs, Marcelo was tending to George, and he said that one-armed Jack had come and attacked while Vlad was out. Vlad asked if he was okay, and George said it had been a long time since he fought a knight, and immediately asked if he had brought the person with him. Vlad said yes, and that he showed him the back doors, so he should be arriving soon. George said that tomorrow they would settle this damned war with that one-armed Jack, and asked Vlad what he thought of the guy, if he still had all 4 limbs. Vlad said yes, he seemed fine and looked like a decent guy. George asked if he had lost weight, and Vlad said he was very agile. Besides, he knew how to use aura, so they would surely resolve everything tomorrow. At that moment, George was startled as the back door was opening and Vlad said he probably had arrived. George called for Vlad and asked if he was sure the guy had used aura, to which Vlad replied yes. He saw it with his own eyes. George then grabbed the blade and told Vlad to stay behind him. Stanger was not a knight who knew how to use aura. Vlad was shocked as Stanger was opening the door, saying it had been a long time since they last saw each other, and greeted George. At the first moment Stanger appeared, he was cleaning a bloody blade, saying the cold now penetrated deep into his bones. And right behind him, the real Stanger had already been killed. Now face to face with George, he said the guy had changed a lot. George asked why he had come out of nowhere. The guy said that Count Gator had died. It hadn't been announced yet due to certain complications, but soon everyone would know. He raised his glass, saying it was for the poor Count of Gaitar. Enraged, George leaped at him, who calmly observed him. The attack shattered half the floor, but the guy vanished in a second, and no one even saw his movement. From behind George, he said it was for Sigmund, the new Count of Gaitar. George shouted the name, calling the guy Godin, landing a blow that Godin defended. Godin said that the new Lord Sigmund ordered that Knight George return now. George shouted that Sigmund was not his master, and Godin replied that Sigmund knew very well he would do that, and he didn't want him to return either. The entire room was being destroyed in the fight between Godin and George. Vlad grabbed Marcella and said they needed to get out of there. With that, they went out the door. As soon as they were outside, the guys called for Vlad and asked what was happening. Vlad shouted for Barry to call everyone because they had a problem up there, when suddenly George was thrown past him. Marcella, Vlad, and everyone there saw him falling to the ground from Godin's blow. Godin said he was still as idiotic as ever. The members of the brothel were asking if the boss was okay. He was writhing on the ground while Godin watched him from above. Suddenly, a knife came his way and he deflected it. It had been thrown by Vlad, who was right next to him. But Godin ignored him and leaped towards George, with Vlad shouting for him to be careful. George was getting up and was almost struck. Godin looked at him and said he should have followed the order from that day. George replied that he was human and didn't follow repulsive orders like that. But Godin said he was not human, but a knight. George gritted his teeth and began to rise amidst the group. Suddenly, Godin said that the night had already been too long. He then closed his eyes, saying he needed to rest. Vlad was running down the stairs and was shocked to see that Godin had activated his blade's aura. He shouted to try to warn everyone. As soon as Godin opened his eye, he told him to stop. White lines began to draw on the bodies of everyone in the brothel, and with a movement of the blade, Godin created a flash that destroyed the entire place. When the smoke cleared, Vlad found himself on the first floor, wondering what happened there. In front of him, all the members of the Smiling Rose were dead. He didn't know what to say when he heard someone beside him and recognized it was George. but he saw the blood on the ground, and he remembered that this had been the first person to extend a hand to a boy from the slum streets. He saw potential in the boy before everyone else, and to the boy, he was the strongest person he had ever seen. But on that silent night, under the pale moonlight, the boy's world was destroyed. Vlad grabbed the sword on the ground and ran towards Godin, telling him to stop. He managed to activate the sword's arc, which caught Godin's attention. He wondered how the slum kid knew how to do that. He said it was impressive while Vlad ran towards him, telling him to die. But soon something hit his stomach and a kick sent him flying to the corner of the room. That split second made Godin realize the boy had natural talent. Before the kick hit his stomach, he twisted his body to reduce the impact. Trying to get up, the voice in Vlad's head told him to breathe or he would faint. Godin thought the boy's talent was too valuable to let him die there, even if it created the risk of facing him when he was stronger. And he remembered when George said that it was always satisfying to see the growth of someone with potential. With that, Godin smiled and told Vlad that knights could only accept fair trades. Vlad was confused, and Godin then revealed that his name wasn't Stanger and he wasn't 42 years old. He handed back 2 pieces of dried meat, saying that was the price of the lie. But he would take George's head, both as a reward and as a symbol of victory. Vlad stared at him, saying he would kill him. But Godin turned and said it was better for him to accept those 2 pieces of meat and not trade his life for nothing. Vlad knew he had no chance. So while Godin left, he swore that one day he would kill him, even if it was the last thing he did. But Godin ignored him and continued towards the door with George's head, while Vlad kept shouting. Sometime later, he met up with Jumina to try to escape from that place. But after that fight, he was already finished. That kick had broken some ribs, and he remembered that as soon as everything was over, Marcella came to him and told him to get up, or else he would end up dying there. Vlad showed no reaction. Marcella got irritated and slapped him, telling him to wake up to life, and asked if he knew the difference between the rich people and them who live in this slum. Opportunity is everything. Those at the top can make mistakes and keep failing because they have that luxury. But a single mistake for them here will end everything. She grabbed his cloak and warned him that in this place, one mistake means you die. So it's best he doesn't miss the only chance he has to get out alive. Jumina asked Vlad if he wanted to go slower, to which he replied that it was okay. He wouldn't let things end there. Suddenly, a man appears behind them, shouting that they are there. Both Vlad and Jumina are being pursued by Jack's men. The nest was now a mess, and even the youngest birds had to learn to fly on their own. Sometime later, the street is filled with Jack's henchmen searching for the 2. The man who had knocked over the candles earlier announces that whoever finds them will be generously rewarded. They continue the hunt, but right behind a door, Vlad and Jumina are hiding. They knew very well that at this rate, there was no way to get out of that place. Vlad told her to go to the coastal region when things calmed down. She asked what he would do, and he said he would manage. But if she stayed with him, it would be even more dangerous. Jumina shouted, saying she would not leave him. But Vlad reminded her that she had said she would do it for Marcella. He told her to ask Harvin for help, but she kept insisting that she didn't want to. Vlad shouted that she was being a nuisance and asked if he looked like someone who could protect her now. She cried, not knowing what to say when someone asked who was there. At that moment, she grabbed a blade that was next to her and pointed it in the direction. It was the blacksmith with a lantern. He asked why there were 2 kids in his shop. Jumina told the old man not to move. The old man wanted to know if they had gone mad since this was his house. Jumina continued shouting, saying if he didn't stay quiet, she would attack him now. But the old man just looked. After staring at them, he said he understood the situation was serious but asked her to put the blade away. Jumina gritted her teeth and told him to hand over the sword now. The old man asked what she was talking about, and she said she wanted him to hand over the sword that was always in front of the forge. Vlad told Jumina to put it away, but she continued shouting for the old man to hand over the sword. The blacksmith knew that was how things worked in the slum. People stole to survive, and that's how he had also come far. And it seemed it was now this young girl's turn. The old man said she was pitiful. Jumina gripped the handle tighter, and Vlad told her not to do it. The old man, on the other hand, just closed his eyes. Suddenly, with a knife, she cut her own hair. The old man was startled, and she said it was the only thing of value she had. But she promised to come back and pay everything back later. All she asked was for him to give the sword to Vlad. The old man observed, not knowing what to say, and asked Vlad if he was leaving, to which he replied yes. The old man thought he had never dreamed of something like this his entire life. But the young man in front of him was about to try even before his wings had grown. He then said the 2 of them were a nuisance, but told them to follow him. Sometime later, he came out with a cart from the shop. Jumina complained about the smell, and he said it was the only option. Suddenly, someone called out to him, asking what he was doing on the street at this hour. The blacksmith realized the men would be persistent, and even this exit would be blocked. One of them approached and asked why he was taking out the trash so late. The blacksmith shouted, saying it was all their fault for causing chaos in the entire city every day. After all the mess that had happened, he could only find time to leave now. The man told the old man to relax a bit, but he asked who the person behind him was because he worked alone. The old man shouted, saying he had to hire someone to help push the cart. The man said he would let him go just because he was the only blacksmith in that slum, but he would have to take a look at who it was. He placed the sword on the person's hood and told them not to move or lose an arm. Then he cut the hood. The old man was startled by the sickly look Jimina made, imitating a beggar, saying she just wanted to earn a piece of bread. Seeing that, the man said they could go. The old man then asked who they were looking for at that hour, and the man replied it was Vlad, who worked for Georgie. He then pulls the cart, saying he's leaving, but the man insists on checking one more time. Under the trash, Vlad was hiding, and the man called someone to take a look. At that moment, all three knew that if anyone checked thoroughly, everything would go wrong. A dark-skinned man with a spear approached and said he would handle it. The old man wondered if he should have taken another route, but he knew those routes must be blocked too. The man remarked that it was a lot of trash, strangely, but seemed to notice something. He readied his spear and Jumina felt insecure. The man said not to blame him because he was just doing his job. He then started to attack the trash, rummaging through it. Jumina and the blacksmith knew something was about to go wrong. The man continued searching through the trash when he suddenly mentioned that Harvin had placed a boat near the river. They investigated because it was strange for someone who couldn't walk to do that. He was just telling them to stay alert and then said they could go. The blacksmith then pulled the cart, and the man told him to consider this a payment of the 40 silver coins his little brother owed Vlad. With that, they left with Vlad thanking Otar until they reached the edge of the dump. The old man said everything from the city was discarded there, and Jumina just asked Vlad to stay safe. With that, he unloaded the cart, and Vlad fell, taking a star with him. That was the product of an old man's dream and a young girl's tears. Sometime later in the mountains, looking at the blade, Vlad asked if it could hear him. The blade responded that it could, and Vlad asked who it was. The blade replied that it unfortunately didn't know. Vlad got angry, saying that this voice kept trying to boss him around all the time but didn't even know who it was. But maybe that's a good thing. They could help each other. Vlad would help the voice recover its memories, and it would teach him how to fight with a sword. He didn't care if it was some kind of demon. At this moment, he only feared one thing: the fact that he was a nobody. The voice then accepted. It would teach him everything it knew about fencing. Sometime later, at a military base, inside one of the tents, someone observed a map of the region. The name was Joseph Fayezid, and he said it all seemed too easy. Too easy. Someone entered the room calling Master Joseph, who recognized him as Zayar. Zayar said something seemed to be bothering him and asked what the problem was. Joseph said everything was too easy. Zayar agreed that they were doing well, but Joseph reminded him that many people were deserting and some were disappearing without reason. If the mission he participated in showed mediocre results, everyone would doubt his abilities as a leader. Both his father and other family members, especially his older brother named Rutger, Zayar remained silent. Joseph thought that if things continued this way, the next count would definitely be Rutger. The Fayezid family is a family of warriors, and their history proves that. After all, his father got to where he is by destroying his own brothers. Joseph said he didn't have enough knights by his side other than Zayar. Zayar approached, saying he needed to talk about that. He said one of the mercenaries was very suspicious. Joseph asked if he thought it was a spy for Rutger, to which Zayar replied that it wasn't that kind of suspicious, but something he would only understand if he went and saw. They then observed a goblin with its belly slashed. Joseph said it was pathetic. The cuts on that goblin were from a total amateur. Zayar told him to look at another. He said it was terrible too. Whoever did that had terrible fencing skills. He kept looking and said the other one looked a little better. Then he noticed that the trajectory of the cut was always the same, but the skill seemed to be improving. He asked Zayar if all that was the work of a single person. Zayar said yes. One of them arrived today and the others were from a month ago. Observing this, Joseph thought it was impossible for someone to evolve so much in just a month, and he asked who this person was. In the middle of the forest, the goblins were writhing as someone cut them down. It was the group of mercenaries they had hired combating them. The men told each other to hold their positions and not let any escape. One of them drew his spear, saying that now this fight was nearing its end, and he calls everyone to finish off what's left. But they all tremble. The guy doesn't realize there's a giant goblin behind him. The monster strikes, and the guy's body is crushed. Everyone there is shocked. The monster roars and starts heading towards them, easily breaking through the front line. The mercenaries wonder where it came from and how they're going to defeat it. They all run towards a chubby guy on a horse. He asks what they think they're doing and tells them to get back to the front line now. But the mercenaries say no one told them they have to fight a hobgoblin. If he wants that, he'll have to pay a lot more. The chubby guy goes to draw his blade, calling them a bunch of useless fools. When a body falls right beside him, the monster is killing the entire group. Seeing this, he calmly puts the blade away again, until someone approaches. The young man has blonde hair and they ask who he is. They recognize him as Lyman the Worshipper. Vlad had taken on a false name, and he's confident he can defeat this hobgoblin. He charges forward and the monster notices his presence. Before the creature reacts, he slashes its back, but he quickly realizes the cut was too shallow, and now he's about to be struck from behind. He notices the attack coming and barely dodges, but he's angry that he failed again. The sword asks how he can't manage when it's told him everything. Vlad thinks he's not a genius who can just listen and do it. Seeing the monster coming, he says for now, he's just trying to find a way to win. The creature approaches and makes another attack that he dodges. Another one comes and he ducks. One swings close to his face and the creature starts losing its temper. At that moment, it goes for a vertical strike. The attack kicks up snow everywhere, but Vlad dodged again, saying he swears this time he will cut through it. The monster looks back as Vlad comes with a slash, and Joseph says he wants Zaire to find out everything about this person called Lyman the worshipper. Zaire accepts the mission while Joseph thinks it's unbelievable. How someone goes from amateur cuts to almost a blade arc in a month, and he smiles knowing that if this is the case. Vlad slashes the creature and Joseph is sure he's a genius. After the battle, people are collecting the goblins' bodies saying there's nothing useful among them. One comes over smiling, saying the captain was incredible. Vlad tells him to stop talking nonsense and gather the bodies of the creatures he killed. The guy says he's already done that and reminds him that this job is about to end, offering to continue working together. But Vlad says he doesn't like looking into the eyes of a criminal, much less working together. The guy then reminds him about the mercenary insignia and says he won't be able to keep using it, offering to call someone who can make a perfect copy. But Vlad warns Got that a loose tongue is the quickest way to die in this place, and it better not be a threat. The poor guy trembles and says he was just trying to help because with such good skills, the boy shouldn't be there. Vlad tells him to finish the preparations unless he's tired of having his head attached to his body. With that, Got says he'll take care of it. While Vlad thinks he'll have to deal with this guy sooner or later, he then leaves the troops. Watching him go, the guys say that Lyman seems to be going to pray again. He really is a very devout boy. In the middle of the forest, he kneels with his head on the sword, and the guys say he looks like the son of a noble family and doesn't even seem to be in the same class as them. But Vlad is asking the voice why he can't defeat the monsters with one cut. The voice says it's told him 1,000 times that the most important thing for a lethal attack is how precise and unexpected it is. Vlad tells it to explain better. The voice tells him to remember when enemies raise their swords and make a gillish. At that moment, he just has to take advantage and make a whoosh. Vlad asks how he's supposed to learn anything from such stupid tips. But the voice says it's too easy. Just pay attention to the whissh and the whoosh. The poor guy is there praying, furious, while the others are all blessing him. The camp is as busy as ever. The only problem is that the meat in this place is quite questionable. Got says he shouldn't complain about the food since it's free. Not many families besides the Vezid offer such privileges. But Vlad gets up and tells them to enjoy the meal. The guys wonder if Vlad is going to see the priest again and seems to be praying for something. He then goes to the church tent, and the priest welcomes Lyman. Vlad greets him and says he hopes he had a good night's sleep. Andrea responds, saying he heard the boy went to pray last night despite the cold. Vlad says no cold can reach him when he's warmed by the Lord's blessings. Andrea laughs, saying the boy sounds more like a priest than he does. The little boy named Jim then announces that breakfast is ready. The priest tells Vlad to sit down, who awkwardly says he didn't come to eat. But they're already preparing to pray, and all he can do is thank for the daily bread. While they pray, the priest glances at Vlad. To him, the boy is very genuine. Someone who hasn't lost an ounce of sincerity despite the misery surrounding him. He needs to guide this young man destined to walk through blood-stained fields of war until the day of his death. Perhaps the connection between them is a gift from God. With that, he says amen and tells Vlad they can eat. Now the lucky guy has fresh bread and hot soup. That's real food. Andrea then says he wants to talk about the boy's fencing. He knew he was talented and says even Joseph Vezid has heard of him. Vlad is curious and asks what happened after that. Andrea says he recommended him because he's a very good boy with a bright future ahead. The Vezid family is widely known even in the north, so just working for them improves his life. And he tells the boy that he more than deserves this opportunity. In the forest, Vlad thinks that this wasn't a good thing. Maybe he stood out too much. The voice says he had no choice since the only way to learn fencing is by using the sword. Maybe he got too close to the priest. Vlad says that could be the case, and the voice asks if he stopped thinking it was a dark spirit. Vlad knows that Father Andrea has a good reputation and was even recommended to be a bishop. If he didn't feel anything wrong, then he's probably fine. Vlad wonders if he should take this opportunity, and the voice says it's a good idea. He's just insecure because to get his insignia, he had to kill another mercenary, and then would be judged for fraud and murder. The voice says that putting it that way, he really seems like a wicked boy. It advises that the best option for now is to run since they're not after him. Vlad says the plan is to escape tonight and take Kot with him. But suddenly, the sword says it doesn't think he'll be able to escape, and he asks what it means by that. She warns that someone is coming from behind, and judging by the energy, it's at least an elite knight. Vlad readies his blade and points it backward. But it's Zaire calmly looking at him, impressed at how sharp he is to have hurt him. Zaire tells him that Lord Joseph wants to see the boy. Vlad gets up, thinking he should have fled but now can't show weakness, and then says he feels honored. Zaire asks if the boy knew he was coming. Vlad says he heard from Father Andrea but didn't expect it so soon. Zaire is once again impressed as he approached, and the boy didn't flinch even once. With that, he begins to walk away, telling him to follow. Seeing Zaire gaining distance, Vlad wonders if he should try to run. The voice tells him not to even think about it. A knight that level can cut off his head in less than 3 steps. With that, Vlad realizes he has no choice. He then goes to Joseph's tent, who greets him, saying it's a pleasure to meet him. Vlad bows, saying it's an honor to meet Lord Joseph. The Lord asks if things are to his liking. Vlad says yes, all thanks to the Lord's kindness. Joseph then says that with blonde hair and blue eyes, he almost looks like the son of a noble. He asks if his name is Lyman, and Vlad confirms. Joseph then closes the book and says he should have known. Zaire slaps him across the face. They stare at each other, and Joseph warns Vlad of Shkora that he hates liars. Vlad says it looks like they already know everything then. Joseph says they know his mother is a prostitute and they don't know where his father ended up, and he asks if Vlad has any idea. Vlad sarcastically asks if this is some new kind of joke, asking the son of a prostitute who his father is. He immediately gets a kick behind the knee and falls to the ground. Zaire tells him to show more respect in that place. Joseph says it's okay since that was funny, but he warns that he knows Vlad killed a mercenary and also the reason he fled Shkora. What he doesn't know is where the boy learned to fight with a sword. Watching him, he says he sees many things hidden behind those eyes. Behind him, Zaire begins to draw his sword. Vlad hesitates for a second, not knowing what to say. Suddenly, he says he learned all this from a master who appeared and disappeared as quickly as light. He did mention the name, but said one thing. This is a secret sword technique that cannot be taught by anyone else. Joseph thinks he doesn't see any hesitation in the boy's eyes, and he apologizes for being so harsh. Vlad wonders if he believed that. The Lord then says that maybe he doesn't know, but at the moment he has a certain problem. So he wants to propose something to Vlad of Shkora, and asks if he aspires to a better life for himself. Power, freedom, survival, and the life of a knight. He, Joseph Fazid, wishes to sponsor him. Soon after, he began to practice with Zaire. The other mercenaries said that he was holding up well. Apparently, he had become Zaire's squire. Really, the boy is a promise. He got lucky because his whole life is about to change. Zaire strikes him, saying he's an arrogant brat, asking how he can be so confident in front of Joseph with such poor fencing. And now he's going to show him his place. Vlad can't keep up as the guy is on a completely different level. If he dodges, he immediately takes another hit. But trying to defend head-on is impossible because the guy's strike is too strong. If that's the case, he puts the sword to protect his shoulder. He lets Zaire's blade slide off and takes advantage of the moment to attack directly. But the guy easily blocks it. That impresses the mercenaries. Even Zaire says he liked the move a bit, but Vlad is the only one who knows very well. Zaire created that opportunity just to see if he could do something. He then tells the boy that this will be the morning and evening training twice a day, and the poor boy is scared. He leaves saying it's enough for a morning practice and tells him not to stay too long in the cold. Vlad wonders if that's all. He didn't receive a single piece of advice, but the voice says that was indeed an excellent fight. It helped remove all unnecessary movements. Really, a beating is the best way to learn. The poor boy wonders why no one ever seems to be on his side. Finishing, Joseph asks what his impression of the boy is. He responds that he has potential. Maybe if he were the son of a noble family, even the count himself would be interested in the boy. Joseph smiles, saying he knew he was right about him. But Zaire warns that the big problem is arrogance since the boy doesn't know his place. The Lord responds that it's okay since the boy grew up in the slum, so it's common for him to be like that, especially considering he has the perfect person for the job. Zaire says a knight without loyalty cannot be trusted. Joseph responds that he wouldn't believe the boy even if he knelt the moment they met. In fact, he even prefers that he is so honest about his feelings. Vlad said he has something he has to do. And for the Lord, it's better that things are this way since they both have something they want and they can both help each other. The knight simply agrees, saying that if that's the case, then it's all right. The boy is like a wolf, pure arrogance, untrustworthy, and still presumptuous. However, Joseph says it's okay. He's in no hurry. It takes a long time to build a cage big enough for a wolf to think he's free. In the forest, God was freezing as it was the middle of winter. He thought it was unbelievable that Vlad had now become Zaire's squire, and it would be difficult for them to escape. Maybe he was lucky since now he doesn't have to stay in the cold and doesn't need to train with the expeditionary forces anymore. Suddenly, a knight comes by and asks if everything is all right. God recognizes him as Roderick and says everything is fine. Roderick tells him to keep an eye out for any problems and leaves, while God says he can count on him. He stands there just watching Roderick and observing the area, thinking that the guy looks like a statue and not even a needle could wake him up. But now with him there, he can finally get some sleep. He ends up dozing off and suddenly wakes up. He hears Roderick asking what someone is doing there and that it looks like someone is looking for a child. He watches Roderick from a distance, who asks what's wrong with a woman and says he's not her son. Got finds all this very confusing and wonders why he stopped mid-sentence. He gulps and starts heading in that direction, confused about what's happening. Why is Roderick going to that place away from the camp? Suddenly, the man is surrounded by a black mist. At that moment, Got trembles. A pale creature appears, whispering in Roderick's ear to leave a like on this video to help Mamoru make more juicy content for his viewers, activate the cheeky little bell, and I'm out.